Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline Podcast, brought to you by the Frontline Strong Together 5 program. FST5 provides streamlined access to behavioral and mental health services, as well as crisis resources for Michigan's Frontline 5 workers and their families. This includes all professional, part-time, and volunteer firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, corrections officers, and 911 dispatchers in Michigan and their immediate family members. First responders and mental health experts collaboratively created FST5 to provide 24/7 live support, effective resources, and cutting-edge services to prevent and alleviate PTSD, anxiety, depression, and other frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Need help now? If you are a frontline worker in Michigan or an immediate family member experiencing any crisis, work-related, substance abuse, depression, relationships, finances, or any other, reach out by calling 1-833-34-STRONG or go to fst5.org for more information. I'm Jeff Lassers, one of the hosts of the Minds on the Frontline podcast, and I'm a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator. Minds on the Frontline is co-hosted by Mike Mattern, who is also a professional firefighter and paramedic. In addition, Mike is a peer support team member for his fire department and the Frontline Strong Together 5 program, a board member of the Michigan Crisis Response Association, and the former chair of the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union Behavioral Health Committee. Mike has training and experience with frontline worker mental and behavioral health. On the other hand, I do not. My role is to produce the show, whereas Mike is our resident subject matter expert. Together, we hope to inform, educate, and entertain frontline workers, their families, and the public regarding the realities of frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. September is Suicide Prevention Month. To honor this important focus, the Minds on the Frontline podcast is dedicating episodes to addressing the urgent issue of suicide among frontline workers. In this episode, we welcome back Manisha Leary, the FST5 program manager and a clinical psychotherapist specializing in trauma. During this episode, we dive deep into what happens after a frontline worker completes suicide. Mike and Manisha will guide us through the critical steps and immediate actions that need to be taken. We discuss the importance of timely notification, the complexities of managing emotions, and the necessity of planning for preemptive support systems. Whether it's the challenging logistics of taking crews out of service or the delicate task of informing an entire department, this conversation highlights the practical strategies and emotional intelligence needed to navigate the aftermath of such a tragic event. This turned out to be a great episode that offers valuable insights and actionable steps to help frontline agencies handle these difficult situations with care and competence. We hope the expert advice shared here will empower our listeners to better support frontline workers and their families during the most challenging times. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Hi, Mike and Manisha.
What's going on, Jeff? How are you?
Hey, guys.
How are you today?
I'm good.
All right. Sounds good.
I'm great.
You're normally asking us how we're doing.
Yeah,
that's my sheet of things
It
to
threw
ask
you
you.
off a little bit.
Check that off the list.
Yes.
Yeah, you got me.
Yep. All right.
Well, although we always have fun together, we're here to talk about another somber topic.
Yes.
Right? In our last episode, we talked about preventing suicide among frontline workers. But today, we're talking about after that actually happens, what do you do? Okay. Yeah. And so for context, you two are here to really be the focus of this because as a clinician, Manisha, and a peer supporter who gets called a lot to help peer support teams deal with this exact same thing, there's almost a checklist that we need to do. You know, in the firefighting community, we call it an LODD, a line of duty death. Mm-hmm. And so if that happens where any of our personnel are killed on duty, whether it's a fire or an accident, you can imagine all the 100 different ways you could get killed there. There is an actual process that plays out. And this is really no different. Whether you're on duty or off duty, there's still some specific actions that every agency really needs to do. And so this class, although is designed for after a very bad tragedy, after it strikes, It is a prevention class, essentially, for those agencies so it doesn't get worse after those incidents. So when we always say, what do I do? This is that thing in one of the worst cases imaginable. Unfortunately, I've had the experience where one of my colleagues, a close colleague, in fact, he was my lieutenant, completed suicide. And looking back, we surely saw it coming. In the moment, it didn't feel as heavy as it turned out to be. And so not only is the prevention class a really big thing for me in the episode that we did in your suicide writ class that you put on all the time, it's a big deal that we talk about to do the next time this happens.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's going to happen again.
So before we begin, you guys have a lot of experience talking to different departments and helping them out. When you have these conversations initially, how many departments have ever really had the thought of, should we have a set of policies or actions we all agree upon to do after something like this happened in our agency?
They have line of duty death, but they don't have anything that's related to this.
Do they just assume a lot of times that they can kind of fall on that?
I think so. It's similar, but it's also a different avenue on the line of duty death checklist.
Well, the similarities are pretty obvious, right? We have a first responder or a frontline worker that has been deceased.
Yes.
And then what are the differences there?
Well, I think the differences for the department is they try to use that LODD procedure for something that is not that. And so I think that's where the complication comes into this, because when it's not a line of duty death and it's a suicide of one of your first responders, it's a whole different process for not only notifying the department, the members in the department, any family that has to do that, but then there's also a community aspect to it. And so I think it's just something that people often don't deal with. In the sense of, okay, we don't really need a procedure for this because this technically didn't have much to do with us. But as you guys know, as I know, it affects the entire department. Sometimes it affects the entire city. It's important for people to have some tools in their toolbox to be able to handle post-suicide.
And I'd like to say if you plan for something a lot, it won't happen. I like to pretend that's true, right? So hopefully if you have this type of stuff in place, you won't need to use it, you know. Here's the thing. Suicide can happen on duty. It can happen off duty. But either way, it kind of becomes not the problem of the department, but certainly like a responsibility of the department to kind of handle that with their personnel, because that's going to be really shocking. You know, we've covered a number of times how this becomes your third family. So what are the immediate steps that departments should take after a suicide within their agency?
Number one, figuring out, did this happen on duty or off duty? Because that's going to really change the dynamics of what we do coming in post-suicide. If the individual completed suicide in the station or in a vehicle, those types of things that are there, then we need to not do our post-suicide intervention in the same spot where this happened.
And it could be even in the same city.
Could be the same city. It could be, you know, if it happened at the station, not at the station. That's a big thing that we look at because you don't want the person walking through the same station to do their diffusing debriefing where this just occurred.
Right.
That's number one. If it's off duty, then generally speaking, we tend to do it at the department because that's kind of their safe area. You know, that's where they're normally at. That's where they've normally gone. But the first action that I would say, and this goes to the people who really make things happen, you need to take the people who are working out of service. And if that means calling neighboring cities to come cover your city for a couple hours, that's what you need to do. Because there is not a single person who's working for you in that ambulance, that patrol car, that fire engine, in the dispatch center, in the corrections facility, that their mind is where it needs to be to perform their job safely at that point. Their mind is with their coworker, their friend, their buddy, whoever it might be. So number one, take them out of service.
You're saying the day of that happened. You're saying,
yes.
Okay.
Yes, because generally speaking, you want to come in as soon as possible and talk to the people of that department or that agency or whatever it might be. And the only way you're going to do that is to get them out of service. So however you do that, and I've seen it happen. I mean, I've seen where communities just step up. the surrounding communities, and they go, listen, we're going to take care of your stuff for the next 4 or 5 hours. You just tell us what you need. And they're calling people in on overtime. They're doing those things to make sure that these people are taken care of and they're getting what they need.
Unfortunately, I've seen a number of times that happen, the need for it. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I've seen so many departments step up and help out. Yeah,
yes, and that's the biggest thing. We need to take them out of service because we need to start talking to them. We need to start processing what's going on. But more importantly, in those early stages is getting the same factual message out to everybody on the department.
Okay, so let's back up a second here just to kind of catch up. So we've had a loss at our department.
Yeah.
There's been a suicide, and at this point it doesn't matter on duty or off duty, just for the fact that it happened. And you're saying so like a peer support team, or is it more specific, like a CISM team is going to come in, or a debriefing team? Help me understand the mechanics of that.
So once you take them out of service, the sooner you can get a hold of that peer support team, CISM team, in the state here, if to be a peer team, the standard is you have CISM training. But what I have to say is if you've had a team that hasn't done a post-suicide intervention, it's not like any CISM call out that you've ever gone to. You still follow the same model, but how you deliver it is a little different because some of the questions, how you frame the questions is a little different. In here, it's not like they've gone to a traumatic scene. They've gone through a traumatic event. Sometimes. There's other times where if it happens within your city, those responders responded to their coworker. Yeah. And that's a whole nother level of, what we're talking about. But you really have to know how to talk to the group about the suicide because it's a lot different than any other approach on how you normally do a CISM. I'm not saying you deviate from the model at all, but how you frame it and how you do it is a little different.
It's going to be very highly sensitive.
It is. And it's highly charged. It's highly sensitive. Sometimes they're still in shock even, and you'll find that people don't even know what to say at those points. Some people haven't really heard what's going on yet, and they're looking for information. So you have a gamut of things that you're walking into. And
this isn't the immediate, the very acute. It just happened. Is like, the department was just notified. Yes. Essentially, the tones have dropped.
Yes.
Of the information. The bomb has dropped on us.
I've been called while they were on scene.
Okay. Yeah.
And said, get your team together. We need you here now.
Right. And you're saying to initiate, start planning for somebody to cover that response area as soon as possible so that we can start processing this.
It's like anything else. The quicker that you can get your peer team, CISM team rolling, the better. Number 2, take those crews out of service. They're not going on another run until they get taken care of because they need to be talked to before they continue what they're doing for
obviously
that day.
Mutually dependent on that.
Mutually
once
dependent.
There,
but have these things set up prior to, like you talked about. You prepare for the worst and you hope for the best.
Yeah.
If you don't have this preparation, there's a lot of back and forth. I don't know who to call. What do we do? One of those things. So if you prepare for it ahead of time and never use the plan, awesome.
And it might be as easy as just all the chiefs in the area talking like, hey, when this goes down, do we all agree we're just sending a unit? And do it? Yeah, we all agree? Great.
We all agree we're going to call in overtime or we're going to send one unit from each community, whatever it might be. Yeah. But set it up ahead of time. You never know if you're in the next community that might need this.
Yeah.
In the first responder community, we prepare for everything. There's an SOP about everything. If this, then this. If this, then this.
Yeah.
You don't really find the SOPs for these things. This is a major event that's going to affect a lot of your people, not only in the short term, but the long term. You should have a plan in place to take care of the greatest resource that you have, and that's the people that work for you.
Absolutely, coming in and making sure that there's someone to kind of relieve the staff from there, right? Mm-hmm. And then next is getting the folks that's in the department, so closest to either working a shift with that person, partners of that person, people that were really close to that individual, and in addition to other supports, getting them in the diffusing as soon as possible, knowing that the people that are closer to them will probably have a stronger effect to losing someone, and especially by suicide, because the folks, as we all know, the people that we're closest to, we assume that that individual would have come to talk to us, or there's something that we could have done to stop this process. And so those individuals will definitely need to talk through, vent, be angry, be emotional, but that all needs to happen in a safe place.
And that also goes, so say the person does it off duty. None of those people are at work. So now you got to try and get a hold of the off-duty crew, like, or their unit or whatever it may be. And, hey, when's the soonest you can get in here and we can talk to you? Like Manisha says, you look at that, the rings of who's closest to the person, and then you build yourself out. Well, that crew or that team that they work on is the number one bullseye person we're looking for. When they're off duty, that's another challenge that off duty presents, is that the people aren't there. They're not in one spot. So we need to try to bring them in from off duty, find a safe space for them to go talk to. What's a good time? Because, any off day, this person's out on the boat here, this person's off doing, So it's the logistical challenges that sometimes come up with on the peer support side and the department side.
So that's a big question for it, is that notification. Notification time is a big deal. So how important is that timely communication about this sensitive topic?
Depends on your department size.
Right.
I mean,
80 people department, you can kind of manage that. But if you're like LA,
yeah,
dude, thousands of people,
it's going to be tough. I'm always a fan of in person. You're getting the message out, but you're also, there's an interaction there.
Yeah.
And getting the information out. When I say the information that can be put out, because sometimes there's information that can't be put out at the time. But what it does is it really gives everybody that baseline of the same knowledge, just the facts. This happened, where it happened.
Yeah.
You don't have to get into the details and things like that. But I think getting that information out early dispels a lot of that rumor and a lot of that, well, I heard type stuff. And it should be delivered by whoever's the head of that department.
It shouldn't just be, hey, everybody spread the word.
If you have a larger department and email is the best way, then, email is the best way, but you could also set up something for the on-duty crews that's in person, right, and then say, hey, tomorrow we're going to have, for anybody who's off duty, if you want to show up and we can give you the information here, we can do it that way.
Sounds like there's a lot of different routes. Like, hey, we need to just tell everybody what's up, and then please call in or do this if you.
Yes, and we always say have peer supporter there and a clinician when you go to deliver this information. That's just for when you deliver it. If there's somebody that's really kind of overwhelmed.
When you say delivering at a debriefing situation, or just notifying everybody.
When you go to notify everybody,
okay,
and even we say when you go to notify the family, take those resources with you for the family as well, because now they don't have to wait for somebody to talk to you. You have it right there in hand, and you're delivering this earth-shattering news, and you got like a peer, or I know some peer teams have spouses that are attached onto their peer team. That might not be a bad idea, but definitely some type of peer support and some type of clinician present when you go to deliver this message, not only to the department, but to the family, to help them start to process and work through this information that they're getting.
What have you found to be like the most effective means of communication, and also the most effective phrasing to kind of break this ice? I know you say it outright, but like, what's worked?
From the departments that I've seen, the departments that came out with just straight facts. This is what's going on. This is what happened. And let them know there's some stuff we can't tell you right now, because, there's investigations and there's, these types of things. But the departments that have been transparent up front, like, these are the facts, this is what happened.
And not cold, probably like
not
respectful.
Cold. No,
I
mean, and when I say this, you got to realize the people who are delivering the message are just as affected as the people who are receiving the message. Mm-hmm. So when I say they're delivering the message, I mean, they're delivering the message through tears. As a head of a department or a agency, you try to project that rock mentality, right? They're still trying to portray that, but you can see it in their eyes that it's affecting them as much as it's affecting the people. Like, they know what they're about to go tell people. That's a heavy thing to carry as well for the people who have to deliver the message.
Yeah.
It's
You're not delivering the news about people you don't know because a crime happened.
Yes.
This is somebody you've probably had hundreds of meals with.
Yes. You've had interactions with, you have a personal connection with, those types of things. So, I mean, you're not delivering it in a cold manner. A lot of times you're just trying to get through it without crying or losing it yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it kind of takes away the rank and seniority and all that other stuff. That's where we really get real and like, we're all human beings at this moment. You know what I mean? This is a raw human emotion, and they try to deliver it the best they can. Whatever their status is in the department, it's still that I got to deliver this bad news to them. The human approach, the face-to-face approach I've seen help the best to kind of dispel those rumors and put everybody on the same page type deal.
So direct notification from the department or from the agency is also super important because you want them to hear from a caring individual before it gets to places like social media as well. Once that happens, there's so much that you can't control in that space, especially if this was a suicide that was completed like in the department or in a squad car or something like that. You want to be able to make sure that your officers are hearing from the department or your firefight, your EMTs, your corrections officers, whomever. You want to make sure that they're hearing directly from the top so that they can have a time to not only process, but also prepare themselves for some of the things that they may hear in the community, they may be exposed to once it gets out there to the wider population. So I think that's why early notification is always important. We want to make sure that people are notified by the people that care how they receive the information.
Yeah, and so once you receive that information that it happened, part of that communication is notification of a debriefing. Or debriefings or diffusions.
Oh, there'll be multiple.
Right,
Yeah.
Right, because you can't get everybody in the same room at the same time.
Well,
And then there's also like you got to keep kind of coming back to it. But before we get in the exact part of that, I want to walk through, what is the process of setting these things up and what am I playing for? And you're playing right into it there. So give everybody the overview of you have to do them, and it's not a one and done deal.
you set up things for the initial incident, and then we set up things for after the funeral, because the funeral is now a second traumatic incident. So the initial instance that happens, we come in, you got to set up a diffusing debriefing. And like I said, we try to do this as soon as possible, especially for the on-duty crews before they go home. And we'll come in, we'll work with some type of liaison from the department. It might be the chief, it might be the union president, whoever they designate to work between us and the department. And then that's when we start coordinating.
What do you mean us?
Peer support team.
Okay, now what if they have their own?
A lot of times, if you've got your own peer support team, you're the liaison, but you're not doing the actual work.
Okay, so you recommend to departments that they use an outside peer support team that
Yes.
they work with. So which should also be set up to like already have in this plan you have,
Yes.
you better have mutual aid for your peer support team.
Yes,
Absolutely.
because your peer supporters are out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're now part of
Right.
the group that's getting diffused and debriefed.
Right.
Where, they may go, well, these are our people, we'll take care of you. Well, you're not in the headspace right now
You
to take care of.
can't be the nurtured and the nurturer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to let somebody else come in and just handle the load for you. We work with them, say, hey, how soon can you get us in there? And like I talked about, the logistical. Okay, well, I got to figure out how to get these stations out of service. I got to, they work on their end and then let us know, okay, we can do this by this time. Some departments, and just based on the size, sometimes if it's a one station department, then everybody comes down to the station. We may do it in shifts. But if you have a larger department and there's multiple stations, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll break up our team into station sections. So Team A is going to go to station 1 and 2. Team B is going to go to 3 and 4. And we'll break it up that way so everybody gets taken care of. On the flip side, on the peer support side, that also spreads out the emotional toll. You're not going through 6 stations in one day.
I was going to say, you debriefing
hours.
Group after group after group.
Yes, and it takes a
your
toll.
brain.
It takes a toll on you and the peer support side. Even if it's not your department, it's a fellow first responder.
Right.
So, any line of duty death is felt across the nation. We try to spread that out as well on the peer support side, is spread out that so you're not doing the 6-hour marathon. Unfortunately, doing enough of these, we learned our lesson. We did that originally, and all of us were burnt out by the end of it. So you learn to kind of spread out the workload a little bit, but you get that initial diffusing debriefing. Whether your team has clinicians or not, you bring clinicians with you on this. This is one of those top-tier traumatic incidents that, as a peer support team, can you handle it? Sure. But really, you should have a clinician with you, because it's that integral of a situation that it's sometimes past our peer support road, that you need that clinical support where if somebody's really struggling, it's not, hey, I'm going to give you a phone number. It's, hey, why don't I get you set up in a room? I got Manisha
like
here.
Immediately,
on the spot.
So we have a culturally
Yes.
competent clinician right there who's been working with peer support
Yes.
teams, who understands this might be coming, who's now available immediately to have that private session.
Yes. And you bring it right there because they're not waiting. They don't need to wait. They
Right.
just went through something that's
And this is part of those logistics that are set up, because if you got multiple teams going on, you need multiple clinicians.
Exactly.
It also speaks to the fact that you need multiple peer supporters, which means that you have to build up your peer support team before the problem. It's just like the
Yes.
tech teams and the hazmat
like everything
teams. You've
else.
got to be prepared.
It's, the peer support teams are right up there with the tech teams.
Yeah.
And
They're probably getting called out more now.
They get
Yeah.
called out way more than any technical team that's ever been assembled.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
I bet you your uniform's not as cool as a tech team BDU, though.
Yeah, we got T-shirts.
Yeah.
So
Comfy.
yeah, but it's one of those. But it's one of those things that, and when we go out and we do these things, you know, we like Manisha said, you set up who am I going to talk to first, who's most affected, and then we work our way out. But we also let them know while we're doing this, we're going to be coming back and doing a second one, because what you have to realize, that first week, everybody's sending something to them, resources, whatever it might be. Not only that, that first week, you're busy doing things. So you're distracted from what the real issue is going on. So you kind of form that scab for a week to get through, you know, how we do. Put our head down, we do the job, we do right by the person who passed away. You know, you're doing a million things. Then the funeral comes, and they see the person up there in the casket, or, you know, the urn is there. And then that's that reality check that this is real. Like, this is happening. You know, and that funeral is sometimes a second trauma to them. Sometimes it's their closure that they need. And you see people kind of trend up, like they're getting better. But others, that's their jumping off point where they start to go down. And so we try to get with them afterwards, and we do a diffusing debriefing to debride that scab a little more before it scabs over, so that they don't have that lasting thing. But the other thing that's super important with that is the follow-up, which is days, weeks, months afterwards, because eventually all that support is going to kind of fly away. For that week, it's a flurry of activity. Everybody's, hey, what can we do for you? You know, those types of things. But after the funeral, it seems like that just all kind of fades away, and then you're just left by yourself. So what we try to do is continue that follow-up where we show you, hey, the support was here on day one, but the support here is also 90 days from now, and
Right.
you know, and they're not forgotten.
So let's break that down a little bit. So the initial diffusing debriefing happens. Then you have another one after the funeral.
Yep.
Then you have another one at X later.
It's not necessarily diffusing debriefing.
Oh, you're just
it's
checking back in
it's
with
phone
people.
calls. Like you pick
Okay.
up the phone and go,
Okay,
hey,
you're just-
you know, how are
little
things
sniff
going?
test.
How's your sleep right now?
The eye test. What's
Yes.
going on? Okay,
Yes.
so let's get back to those debriefings for a moment. I get the concept of what's happening there, but walk me through, like, literally what happens in those containers, those rooms. What's going on in a debriefing?
As peer supporters, we don't have the context of who the person was. We didn't work with them. You know, it may just be a name. And how we really try to go in there is we start off by just talk to me about the person. I want to know about the person. And everybody in that room has some type of story, has some type of experience with that person. What that does is we're not dwelling on the thing that just happened today. We're talking about the person who's involved. And a lot of times, that's all we really have to say, because they'll start talking about, you know, remember when such and such did this at the station, and such did this, and blah, blah, you know. Our goal in that instance on that first day, you really haven't processed what's gone on yet. You're not going to talk a lot about how you feel or those types of things. You may, because you might, you know, a lot of people have different feelings in there, and we'll touch on that here in a little bit. But what we're really trying to do is get them talking. If you can facilitate a group to talk, and talk in a manner that they can talk about what they're feeling or what they're going through, that's where it really works out on that first day. Is we're just facilitators to get the conversation going. And when they start having those stories about the person, you know, then we'll start working in a little bit of our diffusing debriefing stuff. We follow our model that we have, but you kind of let the group take the day where it goes.
Why is that so important, Manisha? Like, what does that do? Does that kind of just soften up the room?
Yeah. Well, it softens up the room too, but then also just the organic nature of a conversation allows people to process. So whether it's like, oh yeah, I remember, this person used to do this all the time, we crack up about this, or somebody like brings up a memory, it gets people comfortable with just talking. So that in itself is processing, which people don't realize that they're doing. People don't realize in the moment that they're actually being able to process, I'm here because someone is not here anymore, right? We're having these conversations because someone is gone. And it makes the idea of coming around and wrapping around and having this same type of discussion after the funeral, after a person has had the opportunity, like we said, see the casket, see the urn, it makes it a little bit more easier to then come back and talk about feelings.
So it's really those first initial actions that's setting the tone for everything else.
Absolutely. If you go in there with a cookie cutter approach on how you do regular diffusings, debriefings,
a bad call versus losing a coworker is a much different thing.
It's probably not going to work because that room is a harder room to talk in than a normal traumatic run. You're literally walking into a group of people who just lost their best friend or coworker versus a patient who they have no personal connection with.
They might not remember their name.
That's it. But you're walking into that room and nobody also probably wants to talk about it. So it's about as cold of a room as you're going to ever walk into as a peer supporter. And if you walk in there with this cookie cutter approach that is more clinical than peer, then it's not going to work.
Meaning, hey guys, now we're going to talk about this. Now we're going to say these things.
Yes.
And what you're saying is let everybody talk, let the conversation steer. And then you said you're going to start dropping some diffusions. So what happens then? Like, how do you physically diffuse that? I get the whole, you're kind of like opening up dialogue. Everybody's now open. We're listening. We're listening to understand now. Exactly. We're all kind of like becoming this symbiotic moment. What are you doing then to help me, as somebody who just went through this loss, process that? And I'm guessing what you mean by process is understand that it happened, accept that it happened, and then learn how to absorb it without losing memory of that person and then moving on without it affecting you negatively.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. That's exactly what we mean by process. And it takes some steps into that. So what makes the debriefing and the diffusing different is that we're not just talking like, it's not just the conversation about this person, how wonderful they were, and having all of these memories. Yes, we do have that part, and that does kind of break the ice. But then we're coming in and saying, these are the things you're going to want to be mindful of in the next couple weeks or the next couple days. You may be feeling this and you don't know how to articulate it. You may be feeling that and you don't want to say, you don't know how to deal with that. These are the things that we give you kind of the tips of what's going to happen.
It's almost like knowing like when you get hit in the head, you're going to get dizzy or you might pass out.
Exactly.
So if you're going to be an MMA fighter, be prepared for that, right?
Yes, be prepared for that. Exactly.
So it's almost like it giving me a way to go, oh, if I'm going to take this medication, it might have this side effect. If I have this experience, I might feel a certain way. It's okay.
Right. Yes, we go through a lot of the emotions and thoughts that you probably are going through, but you don't know what to do with. And like Manisha said, you talk about the different thoughts, emotions, points of view that are even in the room. And
you may be sitting in there with someone who's angry and then someone else who's like bawling because they're so sad. And literally they could be having the same thoughts, but they evoke different emotions. And so that's important to be able to kind of recognize that it's going to look different for everybody. And that's okay too.
Yes. And we explain those, and sometimes that can cause some rifts in there because the person who's pissed off is like, why are you crying over this? And the person who's crying is like, why are you mad at this person? We really try to let people know is both of those emotions are completely acceptable, completely normal. And it's all based on your perspective. What the person who's upset about is they lost their parent to suicide and they think it's selfish, where the crying person, that was their best friend and all they can think about is their best friend's not here. Both emotions are completely normal, acceptable, but it's from different perspectives. So we really set the tone with There's going to be a lot of different emotions in this room, and all of them are okay to have. You just got to respect it from each perspective there. Eventually, these emotions and feelings, if you don't talk about them, are going to come out one way or the other. No matter what, it's all stored potential energy in there. You can put it in that vessel for a little bit, but eventually that vessel is going to blow. We can either sit here at the table today, we can talk about it, and we can take all those thoughts and emotions and release them slowly and in a safe way. Or if you don't talk about it, they're probably going to build up and it's going to blow up. It's going to either blow up at work, it's going to blow up at home, all of these things. But and we never force anybody to talk. Like one of the first things I walk in there, and Manisha's been to some of my diffusings and debriefings. First thing I do, I walk in there and I go, listen, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. I'm not forcing anybody to talk, but what I'm letting them know is if you want to get through this in a safe manner, we need to talk. And you kind of set the tone a little bit like that. But then you just go through your diffusing debriefings and you help them process those thoughts. You help process those feelings. And to what Manisha said, you really do a lot of education. Like this is the roadmap that you're going to go down. You know, the first couple of days, you're going to feel nauseous. You're going to have a headache. You are going to feel like you're wore down. That's normal. You know, you're going to be more angry at home. Something small is going to set you off at home. Just to let you know and that's normal, but you got to let your family members know about this. A lot of it is those types of things. And then generally speaking, when we start doing in the education and helping people process those thoughts and emotions, that's when they really kind of start talking a little bit, you know, and a lot of things that they get into are, you know, their own perspective on it of, you know, how did I miss something? Or how did I not see this, or those types of things. And we help them work through those thoughts and emotions too.
So I was going to ask you, what advice do you have for those people that are struggling with those emotions? You can have a big wide range: sad, confused, you could be angry, you could just be flat out sad, you could be cold, you could be disconnected. Like, so how do you, all of those things are coming from the same place, loss. So, you know, what advice do you have for those people that are struggling with that? What is their options?
Number one, let yourself feel those things and realize that you can bounce between all of those. You don't have to have one emotion. Like crying and 15 minutes from now, you're pissed off. But just, it's okay. Allow yourself to have those emotions. We tell the groups as well, like everybody doesn't want to cry. Okay. The more you hold that back, that's a release of emotions. So get the cry out, let it happen. Because you, like I talked about, that's all stored potential energy in there. If you got to cry, let it out, because you're going to feel better afterwards. If you're going to be angry, but do it in a constructive manner. You know, don't go in your car and just scream, or go work out to burn off that energy. But allow yourself to feel those feelings, because your feelings are real. And the more you try to shove them down, the more they're going to come out eventually. But inevitably, and it comes out at every single one that we have, and every single person in the room feels it. It's guilt. It's the number one overriding emotion that you get every time one of these things happen. And I'm no different. I've had friends who committed suicide who, even knowing these things that we're talking about today, I never saw it in them. And they completed suicide. And you go back and you almost blame yourself a little bit, like, you know, how did I miss a sign or symptom? Or, man, if I would have called that person yesterday, maybe they wouldn't be here today. Or what could I have done to change this? And what people really have to realize, and I cannot stress enough, that's not your guilt to carry. You did not create this situation. You did not carry out this situation. There's only one person who decided on what happened, and that's the person who completed suicide. Your guilt is not yours to carry because you didn't do it. It may feel like you contributed to it, but you did not. That was one person's decision. So the guilt that you're feeling, the guilt that you're carrying, is not yours to carry. Is one of the biggest things that we can tell people, especially with these emotions that go on. And it's one that comes up every single time. And I think it's just a basic human emotion, is you look within yourself of, well, what could I have done differently to change the situation? And a lot of times, there's nothing you could have done.
Yeah, we talked about this in a previous episode, is that sometimes people have made up their mind about this and there's nothing you can do. It's going to happen. You never saw it coming. That's very private about it, and they're just going to make that happen. Mm-hmm. So how do you discuss that with teams to help them process that and be at peace with it?
Well, I think the biggest part is just, again, naming the emotions too, because a lot of people don't know how to put a name to what they're feeling. So Mike talked about guilt. I think shame is a big one too, especially if you and that person recently got into an argument, or this is not necessarily somebody that you really liked, and then this happens and affects the department. I think there's a lot of this kind of space of where people start to own this action within their own emotions, right? So, dang, and maybe if I was nicer to someone, this would have happened. Maybe if I had not had that argument with someone, this could have happened. And I think the biggest part for us when we're coming in and talking to the teams is that what has happened, you taking on parts of that, you owning some of these emotions, you making yourself feel worse in the space isn't going to help the situation, because unfortunately the person can't come back. So what we have to do here is find out what's going to be the new normal, because it's definitely going to be a new normal because the person isn't here anymore. And finding that is going to look different for a lot of different departments, a lot of agencies, and that's okay, right? People, again, we talked about this previously before too, people are really scared of being in the uncomfortable space. But the more that we talk about it, it becomes less uncomfortable, it becomes more normal. And I think that's where we try to focus mostly on with the teams, is that it's not going to be the same.
No, and I think the other thing that it's important to let people know, and it seems when we talk about it, it seems to give some people some relief. It's the people who completed suicide didn't do it because they wanted to hurt anybody, even themselves. Multiple people who've attempted and survived, and they'll tell you the second they did something, they automatically regretted it. They weren't looking to hurt themselves or kill themselves. They had something within themselves that they didn't think they could deal with anymore, and they thought that was a better option. Sometimes they feel like they were a burden to the people that were still here, and they're releasing the people from the burden. And one of the things that we also try to explain, and I learned from a clinician, is when they start prepping for stuff, like they'll leave a note, they'll leave their passwords, they'll leave the keys to all the cars and house and all these things. It's actually a sign of love to the people who are left behind, because they don't want to hurt them. They don't want to affect them. So it's actually a sign of love that they're doing these things. And how we explain it to them as well is that's their way of saying they love you. It's a messed up way of doing that, some people think, but they were trying to take care of you in their last days, in their last moments.
Because they had so much pain.
Because they had so much pain.
They had to do something to make it easier on you, or at least show you that respect in some way.
Yes, that was a show of love to them, that I still wanted to take care of you even though this was going on. And it took me a long time to even process that when somebody told me, because I'm like, why do people do this? And that's how it was explained to me. Yeah. It was that it's their last show of love, and sometimes when they do it on duty, or they do it right after shift or something like that, how I kind of explain it to the people is, if you think about it, they chose you guys to be the last people that they stayed with. They could have called in sick today, right? But they didn't. They chose you to spend that last day with. They'll never say they love you, but you meant something to them where you were the last people they wanted to spend their day with. It's the perspective of it on how people look at it and really getting into it. That's another aspect that we like to try to tell people. We're looking at it in this one way, but you also can look at it in a different way of how the perspective of the whole situation is.
Yeah. And sometimes you won't have that person that preps and leaves you all the things. Sometimes you won't have the person that gives you all the warning signs and do all the things. Sometimes it may just be the person that just has to escape their own pain. And that is the focus for them. And that's why they do that. So there's going to be many times that we don't know the reason. We don't know what the why was. And that's okay, right? That's okay. The more that we can look into remembering the person in the way that we want to, the better that it helps with that process of finding your new normal.
And that's a big thing. Is like Manisha said, is helping them navigate what that new normal is. Because eventually they're going to have to go back to work. Say that person was on your crew, you guys have to start a new normal now.
Yeah.
Or if it's, your department has to start a new normal. No matter what, that changed everything. From that second forward, that department, that crew, that everything completely changed. And now we have to navigate what our new normal is. How are we going to go on runs without that person now? Going to work is going to make you think of that person. So it's really helping them process that future of what's new now. What's our new normal.
So as we wrap up, I'd like to get each of you your take on your top 3 most crucial things departments need to be prepared for in the event one of their frontline members commits suicide. Manisha, let's start with you.
First and foremost, you have to know who's going to be the deliverer, like the person who's going to deliver the news, right? So whether we talked about before, whether it's somebody that's ahead in the department, you got to know who's going to give that news and how they're going to set out that news. So whether it is an email or you guys are sending people out to talk to folks face to face, you kind of have a plan for that. I would say number 2 is rely on the supports that you have in the community. Use your mutual aid when you can to call in to have people help out so that you can be there and provide what you need for your staff. That's so important, right? So if we want people to reach out to help for us, if we need help in that space, we should act in that way. Showing it in that space is the best way to do it. And then the third thing is I would say is I don't want anyone in the department to feel like they have to be the mental health professional. This is a space where you should feel comfortable bringing in either a mental health professional with you or giving it off when it's too heavy, when the emotions are too strong, when you don't have the words to share with someone. We are here to help. There's people that are here to help in that process. There's culturally competent clinicians. There are people who the initial debriefings, the initial defusings won't be enough for. And in that space, you want to be armed with the right people to pass it off to.
Great words. How about you, Mike?
The first one is plan ahead. Have a plan in place. And if you don't know where to start, call the people who do to help you out. Because I think that's one thing is I think a lot of places don't have a plan in place because they don't know how to even start putting a plan in place.
What do they call you?
You can call me. You can call Frontline Strong. We can get peers out there who have done this before, and we'll walk you right through it.
Maybe even ahead of time to help you write that policy.
That's what I mean. I mean, we'll help you get a policy in place to where, we'll make it very easy for you. Don't do it because you don't know how to do it. You've got resources now with Frontline Strong where we can get you out there, but you have to plan early. And that's not only having the SOP in place, it's talking to those surrounding communities and having the logistical support for it. I think the second one is you definitely need to have mutual aid, peer support, and resources in place ready to go. It's pre-planning those things. It's not when it happens, okay, well, what teams do we have in the area? What do we do? Those types of things. It's we have a list. If this happens, I'm calling this, and this person, and having that in place. I think that's number 2. Number 3, giving your support to your people as long as they need it. It's not on your timetable. It's on their timetable. Because you think they should be over it in a month, that doesn't mean you should not be checking in on them, maybe giving them a little leeway to do less things. Let the people do what they need to do to heal. And it's not on your timetable as leader of that department or that agency. Let the process happen. Let it happen and make sure you take care of them. I would talk to peer support teams in their steps. Prepare for this. Have something in place on the peer support side. 2, train for this. Do mock post-suicide interventions. Number 3, take care of yourselves. Because I'll tell you, having to do these, the second the phone rings, there's a moment of dread that comes over me when I get these because I know the emotional toll that it's going to take on me over the next days, weeks, months. Not that I love, I'll go out and do them, but I know now.
You're realistic about what it's doing.
I'm realistic because it's, like I said, it's something that it's a fellow first responder.
Right.
I'm telling you right now, it takes a huge emotional toll on you. You will be exhausted by the end of the day, and all you've done is sit at a table and listen to people talk. when I say have a plan in place for your own team. We go through our own debriefings after we go and diffuse and debrief other teams, because this takes such an emotional toll on you that you need to plan on having multiple teams to spread it out, but you also need to plan on the aftercare for your own team, because these will drain you and these will affect you as peer supporters. If you're in a peer support capacity, these are some of the things that you need to do ahead of time to take care of yourself after these calls. It's not just we're going out and helping other people. You also have to walk the walk if you're going to talk the talk. And that's doing diffusings and debriefings on your team with a clinician led. I mean, Manisha's done them for our team after we've gone out and call outs. We're going to sit in a room and we're going to debrief. So those are steps that, on a peer support side, that you need to really take when it comes to post-suicide interventions.
This is all great advice, and I hope we're not overwhelming departments that don't have this set up yet. So I think it's really important to just find out the people that have the resources, start down that road, and build on that. You're not going to get it done in a day.
Yeah.
But certainly get a hold of us over at FST5, and somebody can lead the way. Even if you're from outside of Michigan. Mike's also been emailing people outside of Michigan, too, helping them out.
Multiple states. Hawaii is the furthest away. No joke. Hawaii is the furthest out.
Neat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, you've been helping out? Yeah.
Oklahoma, was it Kentucky? It's all over.
There's a whole bunch of them.
But,
so anyway.
we were reached out to by a group in Tennessee.
Awesome.
So that's good.
It's all about sharing.
Yes.
Sharing is caring.
Yes. And if little shameless plug, a lot of times we'll go out and do trainings. It's not just myself. It's the Dearborn Firefighters Local 412 peer support team. We created what's called suicide RIT training for all first responders, and we hold these trainings. Anybody can have them here in the state of Michigan. We're a Q course.
Even some out. Give Mike a call. He might come out to you.
Yeah, we'll come out. We'll come out to anybody. We'll talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Any first responder, any department, whatever. But it was important enough. Unfortunately, our team has done a lot of these, and we've gone to a lot of the suicide prevention intervention trainings. And the suicide prevention intervention trainings are great, don't get me wrong. But they never prepare you for what happens when you do everything that they tell you to do and the person still completes suicide. And that's really where our class is very different, where we present the suicide prevention intervention training from a first responder perspective for first responders, but we also give you the tools that if things don't work out how you want them to, we also prepare you for that. Because I think if you're preparing people to have those conversations and with the people who are suicidal, you also need to prepare them if it doesn't work. So that's kind of where our class changes a little bit. So
it's a great class. I hope you guys check it out. Check out the description for more information. Mm-hmm. Manisha, Michael, it was very good having you guys today.
Well, it's very good talking to you, Jeff.
Thanks for coming on your own show.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We hope everyone enjoyed this episode. We have more great content coming out soon. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.